Ah yes, Caesar's Gallic Wars. The perfect example of a PR stunt in the 1st century BC. Now Caesar wrote his commentaries in the third person, and they're the only written source we have of his 2 invasions of Britain in 55 and 54 BC respectively, so going into this I'd recommend you use a legionary's salary worth of salt. But since I want to cover the Roman invasions of Britain on this channel, Caesar is naturally a good place to start. So please sit back and relax as we cover his first invasion in 55 BC. Now, to understand why Caesar decided to hop over the channel in 55 BC, it's probably best to understand what he was doing in northern Gaul to begin with. So in 58 BC, Caesar was given command of the Roman territories of Transalpine Gaul, Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum. Now the most important of these to this discussion is Transalpine Gaul, as he used it as a springboard to military success. Over the following 8 years, Caesar fought a number of wars known collectively as the Gallic Wars, bringing Roman dominion to all of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Germany. Caesar, ever the great promoter that he was trying to outshine his rivals back home in Rome. And that's what brings us to the shores of northern Gaul in 55 BC. Now, to the Romans of the 1st century BC, Britain was seen as mysterious and remote, the great unknown of the ancient world. Caesar was very well aware then that to be the first Roman general to make that crossing, it would be nothing short of spectacular. So on the pretense that some British tribes had helped the Gauls in his recent conquests against them, he decided the time had come to cross the channel. But before he went over with the legions, he wanted to know everything he could about the island, so he summoned traders from all over Gaul to find out some more. But he was out of luck, as he stated in his commentaries. When Caesar summoned traders from every region, he was unable to ascertain either the size of the island, the nature and numbers of the peoples living there, their skills in warfare, their established customs, or which harbours were suitable for a fleet of fairly large ships. Now, since Caesar couldn't get the information that he required, he sent 2 individuals ahead of the legions to try and find out more. One of these was a Gallic chieftain called Commius, and the other was a Roman officer called Gaius Volscenus. Looking first at Commius, there was a certain degree of logic in sending him. He was a chief of a tribe called the Atrebates, and just as luck would have it, the Atrebates had a splinter group living in Britain. Who else would be better to smooth things out for Caesar? Well, as it turns out, the Atrebates in Britain were nowhere near the tribes that Commius was sent to speak to, and naturally the tribes of southeastern Britain were not going to listen to a random Gallic chieftain. So naturally, they locked him up. But what about Gaius? Well, he was sent on a warship to try and find a suitable landing ground for the legions. He was away for 5 days, and when he came back, he passed on all he had learnt to Caesar. However, as we will discover shortly, when Caesar did turn up with the legions, presumably off the coast of Dover, he decided that a landing there would be impossible and had to sail up the coast to try and land somewhere else. So either the information that Gaius gave wasn't good enough, or he just didn't find a suitable landing ground. Caesar crossed the channel from a place called Portus Aetius, near modern-day Boulogne, with a total of 80 ships transporting 2 legions. Most of these ships were built by the Romans themselves, but some came from the Veneti tribe. A further 18 ships were supposed to transport the cavalry, but in the end, the cavalry didn't make it to Britain. They set off 4 days later than the rest of the army, got caught in a huge storm, and had to go back to Gaul. The lack of cavalry would be a big problem for Caesar. Now, the image that greeted Caesar and the legions as they approached Britain was a powerful one. Up above them, on the white cliffs, stood a full army of Britons, fully armed and ready to repel any invasion. Caesar talks about if they had landed, they were at such a height that they would just hurl missiles down at the legionaries. He decided that a landing there would be impossible. So he sailed 6.5 miles around the coast to find a more suitable landing ground. The place where Caesar landed was probably Ebb's fleet in Kent, and it wasn't an easy landing, as the Britons shadowed the Romans around the coast and were on the beach ready to stop any disembarkation. To add to the Romans' woes, their ships were far too big to reach the shore, so the legionaries had to leap into the water in full armour and wade to shore, all the while having missiles thrown at them. And despite Caesar's best efforts to use smaller ships to flank the enemy and throw missiles of their own, there was still great confusion and hesitation in the legions. This is where our unnamed standard bearer comes in. According to Caesar, the standard bearer of the 10th Legion is meant to have ordered his comrades to do their duty to the Republic, and to Caesar leapt into the water and started striding to shore. This act seemingly shamed his comrades into doing the same, and other ships saw what had happened and they followed suit. The fighting on the beach was fierce, with the Romans having to gather around whatever standards they could find. There was still great confusion, and Caesar had to keep sending reinforcements via small boats to different bits of the line. But slowly but surely, the Romans gained the momentum, and as soon as they were on dry land, they were able to rout the enemy. But because of Caesar's lack of cavalry, he wasn't able to pursue them. After the battle, Caesar made a camp, and the Britons sent envoys to discuss a peace with Caesar. They handed over hostages and promised to do exactly as they were told. This is also where Commius was handed back to the Romans. 4 days later, the storm that stopped the cavalry from being able to join them hit Caesar's fleet, severely damaging several ships, and Caesar had to cannibalise several ships to fix the more seaworthy ones, losing 12 ships in the process. This was a terrible blow, and it was also blood in the water for the Britons. Caesar had arrived in Britain without any supplies, so he had to send out foraging parties to find food. One of these parties consisted of men of the 7th Legion, who whilst they were out foraging were ambushed by the Britons in their terrifying chariots. Luckily for them, their battle produced so much dust that Caesar was able to come and save them. Interestingly though, Caesar chose to withdraw rather than fight a pitched battle, as he had not yet found a way of effectively fighting British chariots. It seems that the writing was very much on the wall for Caesar's first invasion of Britain. Since he only had 30 cavalrymen provided by Commius, he wasn't able to take advantage of any major victories against the Britons. Caesar fought one more battle that year against the Britons, not far from the Roman camp, but he doesn't go into much more detail than they fought, the enemy fled, and the legions went on a violent burning and killing spree. Once again, the Britons sent envoys, gave hostages, but Caesar ordered that these hostages be sent to Gaul, as the equinox was approaching, and Caesar didn't want to get caught in any more storms. So as soon as the weather was good enough, Caesar set sail back to Gaul. As soon as the Senate heard about what had happened in Britain, they ordered 20 days of Thanksgiving. The PR stunt had been a great success, but Caesar wasn't done with Britain yet.